Napoleon may just be the most fun watching experience I've had this year, and that's saying a lot. Forget Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon, let's not sleep on the real Oscar contender, Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear was great, but dare I say, Napoleon might take the cake for the most fun movie of the year. If I'm being completely honest, I had a great time watching this movie, and I love that it knows what you're there for. It doesn't bother getting into semantics about the French Revolution or politics, it just gives it to you straight. It's also strangely funny at times. I was expecting a super serious biopic, but the movie has some moments where you can't help but laugh. The dialogue is also odd at times, and it got to a point where I decided the movie is just a black comedy. Even if that classification is wrong and the dialogue is just poorly written in some parts, it's more fun to think of Napoleon as a black comedy, so I'm gonna go with that. You have some lovemaking scenes where the blank expressions and dryness shown by the actors can't help but make you laugh. There's awkward moments like Napoleon calling a woman handsome and some other quirks that'll get a chuckle. It's also weird to see someone like Napoleon being so vulnerable and human. Bro is literally a simp and a cuck, and if you have seen the movie you know that. His attitude, especially in the first hour of the film, is completely different from the stoic badass general that we've all heard of. And that adds to the movie being funnier than you would expect. You don't really get to see the typical Napoleon we think of until about an hour into the movie, but when he shows up, you get to see him in his full glory. There is a specific battle scene that happens in Russia that was the high point of the movie for me, and this was one of the coolest war scenes I have seen in a long time. Now is also probably as good of a time as any to mention that I am no history buff and I never did any digging on Napoleon past what I read in high school, so I'm not going to critique the film for its historical accuracy. I understand this is probably the biggest complaint against the film, but I'm not a historian, so I'm not gonna bother picking apart the historical inaccuracies because I wouldn't even know them. I would rather judge the movie purely as a film, which is the same way I've treated other movies that dabble with history. And this brings us to the title of this video. Napoleon is based. More so, Ridley Scott is based. People were complaining about the lack of historical accuracy, and my boy put them to sleep. To use a boxing and MMA term, he handed out 10 sevens. It starts off pretty mild, with Ridley Scott telling people who are criticizing his film to get a life. You already know that most directors wouldn't bother responding, or they would give a non-controversial answer, but Ridley Scott isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Then it gets a little bit more crazy. Ridley Scott gets criticized for making the film too anti-French, and look at his response. If this isn't based, then I don't know what is. But the real winner is this. When I have issues with historians, I ask, "Excuse me mate, were you there? No? Well shut the fuck up then." This is the most base thing I've ever heard a director say, and you know what? I respect it. You already know that if Nolan, Fincher, or some other director was in Ridley Scott's shoes, then they would pull out some cobweb-covered encyclopedia and go to volume 3 to find an obscure-ass reference to justify the decision-making in the film. But Ridley is built different. It's the difference between flirting and harassment. It may seem like Ridley has sour grapes, but he's just a Chad speaking his mind. To be completely honest, I don't really get the hate for this movie. It's a fun movie, and I found it to have a touch of humor at the same time. Obviously, it's not perfect. I found the Battle of Waterloo scene to drag on for too long. If you're looking for the tactics and profound strategies of Napoleon, they're not really that deeply explored in the film. And if you care about the political intricacies, behind every event, then you won't really find that here. It's not a particularly deep movie, but god damn it, I had fun. I enjoyed the film, and if you want to critically analyze it and point out every flaw, then go ahead. But don't act like you're fun at parties. The real Sigma Giga Chad in this film isn't Napoleon, it's the man behind the camera. Ridley Scott is worth $400 million and still takes the bus. He's 85 years old, but he's still putting out bangers. Yes, Napoleon isn't some technical marvel like Oppenheimer, but it's a fun movie, and I think we should appreciate older filmmakers still trying their best on films, even if it isn't their best work. So there you have it, Napoleon, the most based film of the year.